Are you somebody who wants to learn how to draw, but feel the whole process is a bit intimidating? If so, I have a couple tips for you that can make it all seem a little bit more digestible. Let's get started. Welcome to my channel. My name is David. Thanks for stopping by. I wanted to share today some simple steps you can take to make drawing a little less intimidating, especially if you're new to drawing or you're trying to rekindle some steps in drawing if you haven't drawn for a while. How to break it down and make it a little bit more digestible. So we're drawing here a rabbit, and the first step is to look at the negative space. If you start to draw a subject matter and think about what the subject matter is, you're going to tend to draw it the way you think it should be. So for example, an animal is a perfect thing to think about how this happens, right? Like as kids, we draw cats, we draw puppies, whatever it is, and we have a certain way that we draw it because we think we know how it looks. So drawing negative space simply means drawing what's around the subject and not drawing the subject itself. So you can see here the bright green around the rabbit indicates the negative space. So it's simply the space around the object that isn't the object itself. And what you're doing is you're drawing the shape of that negative space. The next step is very similar in that you're drawing shapes and not things. So in the same way that we looked at the negative space as a shape instead of looking at the rabbit itself, now when we start to draw the rabbit, we're looking at it as shapes and not things. So starting off with the ear, I'm not drawing an ear, but I'm drawing basically a triangle. As I'm drawing the head, I'm drawing a square, and so forth. You can see in the upper left, this image, I put green lines over the top of the rabbit so you can see it as shapes rather than a head, an ear, a paw, etc. So this just makes it a lot less intimidating, and it takes your mind out of what you think it is versus what it actually is, what you're actually seeing versus what you know it to be. Really great practice not only in drawing, but as you get into painting as well, you're essentially going to be painting shapes and not things. So when I made this picture of the rabbit, I was drawing from the actual picture of the rabbit. I didn't overlay these lines or shapes on top of it and then draw the shapes. I was drawing from the actual photo of the rabbit undoctored. And that's important because you want to train yourself to see those shapes without any aid. So once you get the major shapes established, then you can start to actually put in the contour lines, which is basically the outline of your subject matter. So this is where the sketch and the drawing will start to take shape and look a little bit more close to what the actual subject matter is. And the first step would be just stay with the major outline of the drawing. Don't get into the inner details of the head and so forth. And you can kind of see I'm just, taking my time and just kind of filling in the generalized contour line and adding a little bit of my own artistry into the way I make a line, which is probably a subject for a different video. So this whole approach of drawing shapes and not things, you can put this into practice not only when you're drawing, but also as you're kind of going about through your day and just looking at the world. So as you're out on a walk or as you're on a drive or whatever it is, and you're observing the world, start to observe the world as shapes, so objects as shapes and not things. So you're looking at a lamp, but not seeing a lamp, but you're kind of breaking it down into what are the shapes of that lamp. And that will start to train your eye into seeing this way and kind of naturally observing your subject matter when you're drawing. So the next step is defining the forms in space. So this is where your drawing and sketch will start to take shape and really kind of look like what it is that you intend it to look like. So here I've erased the actual lines that were used to create the shapes so that I can start to establish the form. And this is where your contour and your inner contour lines will define those shapes rather than the generalized shape lines. That was a little clunky, I apologize. So this is also where you're going to start to use shading to define the form. And your method of shading is really up to you and your style. I have a very loose approach to this, and I rely more on the expressiveness of the line rather than detailed shading to let the form come to life. This is also the point where you're going to want to add some kind of reference to the space that your subject matter is in. And this is where the background lines in the sketch start to put this rabbit into a bit of a space rather than just being on a blank background. Start filling in some of the details of the eye and some of the finer points. So this is where the next step becomes really critical. And I encourage people to do this no matter what you're doing, even if you're just considering it a loose sketch, but that is to step back and fix anything that's not working. You'll see here that obviously this video is sped up for demonstration purposes, but I tend to work pretty fast anyway in a sketch. And with that, if you're not stepping back, you can just miss some basic whether it's a proportional element or anatomical element. In this case, the position of the nostril on the rabbit, I want to call it a snout, but that's not the right term. Essentially the nose area of the rabbit, the nostrils not in the right position, and I didn't notice that until I stepped back. So stepping back really gives you that, bigger picture, no pun intended, and you'll notice things that are wrong with your image. And then as you fix it and step back, you just want to add a little bit more detail. And this is really kind of up to you. And this really is something that over time you're going to start to get a sense for how much detail is necessary to have the picture come to life. And usually less detail is better. So quick review of some of the things we talked about. Your first step is really identifying those negative spaces and seeing the negative space as a shape and not focusing on the subject and drawing that rather than the subject. The next step is drawing the subject matter shapes and not the subject itself. So you're applying that same mindset to the subject matter as that you applied to the negative space. Then you want to move on to those contour lines, and you're using the shapes as that skeletal structure to help you define those contour lines. And then you can put in your forms and your sense of space. And most important is really stepping back and looking at what needs to be fixed and then adding your detail.
I hope you found that helpful. Whether you're doing a drawing that's very simple or something more complex, these foundational principles apply to both. If you're interested in taking lessons with me, scan the QR code below or click the link below the video. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.